everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com, the #1 site for learning bass online. We're joined this week by a very special guest, Tom Wakeling. How are you, Tom?
I am well, John. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I've got to tell you, I haven't been familiar with you when you're playing for too long, but I've discovered you online. I've seen some of your emails, and that inspired me to check out some of your YouTube videos because you've played with a lot of my heroes in the jazz world. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about you. You're in Arizona now, but you live in Oregon. Is that correct?
I do. I live in Portland. Yes, I actually grew up in Chicago, born in Seattle, grew up in Chicago, and moved out to Oregon in my last year of high school.
You like to zigzag across the country.
Yeah.
Do you notice that I pronounced Oregon correctly? I bet it irks you.
Congratulations.
It's right. Not Oregon. It's not Oregon. Oregon is one of 3 states I've never been to.
Well, it's really, the Pacific Northwest is wonderful. I really like it. I just don't like to stay there all year around. It gets a little dark and rainy.
Okay. Alaska and New Hampshire are the other 2, by the way.
Okay.
Well, I really love your playing. Tell me about your musical upbringing and how you became a bass player.
Well, actually, I started on clarinet when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I got private lessons right away. I had the benefit of having parents who valued music education and education.
This was in Chicago then, right?
I'm sorry?
This was in Chicago, right?
Yeah, yep. So started first in Seattle, then in Chicago. Began with clarinet lessons and played clarinet all the way through school and saxophone in later school, in high school. And the last year in high school, when I moved out to Oregon, Portland, they needed a bass player in the stage band, what they used to call stage bands. Now I guess they call them jazz ensembles.
I was in the stage band in high school too. Yep,
yeah, and I always dug the bass. I had messed around with friends' basses when I was playing saxophone and living in Chicago as a teenager, and I just dug it. So I volunteered, and I became a bass player.
Upright bass, I assume, right?
It was electric. They gave me an electric bass and the bass book for the jazz band. Said, "Here, learn this." And I had studied piano as well, so I understood bass clef. My teachers had said, if you're serious about music and you're a clarinetist, you need to learn how to double if you want to work. So you should learn the saxophone. So I did what my teachers said I should do. And then they said, if you're serious about music, you should play the piano. You should learn the piano. So I took piano lessons. So when the opportunity came along to play the electric bass, I knew how to read bass clef. And that was huge. So anyway, I learned the bass book and, became an electric bass player and played clarinet still all the way through college, classical clarinet. But I was, making a living playing the bass by then. I was playing gigs and, while I was in college, and the clarinet was primarily, I played it because they made me. They wouldn't let me play electric bass as a major.
What school was that?
That was Portland State University in Portland.
What about today? If you were a student there in college, would they let you I hate to say get away with that, but that's
I think they would. I think things have changed. I think they would probably counsel one to learn the upright bass and the electric bass, though they've taken such divergent paths the last 30 years that I think it's entirely possible for one to just play one or the other. I very seldom play electric bass anymore. I do some work for I have one organization, one client that I do work for, and I play electric for their recordings, on some of their recordings, but I don't really work on it too much. I work on the upright.
But you remind me, when I was in college, the jazz guys would sit down at the piano, the students, and some of the professors would say, no jazz allowed on the piano. They thought it hurt the piano.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it's okay to play Liszt and Rachmaninoff and all that stuff that they bang on with the piano.
Yeah, things have changed. I mean, things have opened up, I think, and
absolutely.
And the electric. I played a lot of electric bass for a long time because it paid the bills. and I enjoyed it. But when it started getting to the point where I became really interested in, I was just really getting deeper and deeper into wanting to be focused on playing jazz music, and combined with the slapping, the all the slapping
The
thing,
the uprights like the Milt Hinton slapping, or
no,
the
no, like the
like the
electric.
Larry Graham slapping on the
Yeah,
electric.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that was when I started just, and it started appearing in, I was, at that time I was playing a lot of shows, a lot of touring shows that
Yeah.
would come through the region. And when it started appearing in bass books, electric bass books on these shows, I just went, I think it's time for me not to do this anymore. And also, as I said, I was really enjoying playing jazz music by then, playing upright bass more. So it was a good time for me to back out of that part of
So,
it.
who were you listening to once you started playing bass? Who were your bass influences?
Oh, wow.
I'm guessing you were playing electric, but you gravitated to the upright players.
Yeah, I was playing electric, but it was Ray, it was Ray and Paul Chambers and Ron, or I think what I could say are my primary, Ray Brown, Paul Chambers, and Ron
It's
Carter.
great that you're on a first name basis with those guys.
Actually, I did get to, I went to a summer workshop years ago, a week-long thing that Ray was at, and I pestered him, and he gave me some lessons, and I sort of got to know him. He was really gracious to me. And I worked for a long time with a singer named Nancy King, who Ray really loved, and she recorded with Ray actually. So,
I saw one of your YouTube videos with her.
yeah, she's fantastic. And we'd run in, we'd run into Ray out, Chicago or somewhere, and I'd always, sort of hang on. I'd always go try to talk to him, and so he was always very nice to me. I can't say we were friends, but we knew each other, and.
I
Yeah.
got to see him in a club in New York, late '80s, with Mickey Roker on drums, and
Oh
I
yeah.
don't remember who else was in the band, but I'm really glad that I got to see him.
I
Play
saw him a
live.
ton. Yeah. He was unbelievable.
It's funny because he didn't look like he was working real hard, but what he was doing was just so smooth. Kind of like he reminded me of George Duvivier, just look what he's doing, and he's not even breaking a sweat. It's
I think that is what we strive for.
yeah. Well, so what's keeping you busy these days?
Well, I just finished 4 concerts with the vibraphonist Chuck Red. Chuck lives in Washington, D.C., also plays great drums. He began his career at 21 touring with Charlie Bird, and later with the great guitars with Barney Kessel, Herb Ellis. And
I saw them. I saw
yeah,
those three together in like 1980.
and Chuck would have probably been playing drums with him. So I just did a series of gigs with Chuck out here in the West, and we had Lewis Nash on drums, which was a huge treat. Lewis just lights it up every time.
Yeah.
Wonderful pianist from Tucson named Angelo Versace. And so anyway, I did that, and I've got a few other things here in Arizona, and then I'm heading back up to Oregon. I'm playing a concert actually out in Oregon with Chuck in April, and on my way home, and then headed back up to Portland. I'll be around Portland for April and I think most of May, and I've got a couple of trips in June, and then I like to be home, in July, August. It's beautiful weather up there in that time of year, so I don't really have to be out playing all the time. I'm sort of picky about what I do, but I seem to work, as much as I want, I guess you could say.
Well, as I mentioned, you played with some of my heroes, and I saw names like, well, you mentioned Herb Ellis, Benny Golson, James Moody, Lee Konitz. How did you get in that mix?
It's funny. It's a combination of, I guess, being at the right place at the right time, and sort of shining when it's time to shine, and so people hire me to do stuff, and I mean it's like so many other things. I got on the Lee Konitz thing. We played in Europe, and through a drummer, who I work with, and they needed somebody to do these gigs, and he recommended me, and that was that. So I got to do it, and I played with Lee later in Portland. We played Portland Jazz Festival just several years ago, and I mean, it was an amazing experience, to do that. And, Benny, same thing, is a pianist that knows me, and I was available, and he needed a bass player. So
Tell me about your bass and any other gear or equipment you have.
well, I have an old pre-CBS Fender Precision. When we're talking
I
electric,
was not expecting that to be the first thing out of your mouth.
I guess I'm going chronologically. And I got that. Gosh, I must have been about 17 or 18, 19 when I got that bass. It wasn't my first bass, but it was my first real bass, good bass. And I played it for a long time. And then when Jocko first came out, and that first record he did that had Donna Lee on it,
Donna Lee,
it just flipped me out. So I went to my luthier. And on my way to a gig, actually, it said, "Man, pull the frets off I want you to take the frets out of my bass." So he pulled them all out, and I went to the gig. And it took me a while to learn how to play in tune. But
when the bass is out of tune, the whole band's out of tune.
I know, yeah. But I was hooked, So I had that bass eventually customized. He put a different fingerboard on it, and different and.
The boat epoxy and that.
All that. Yeah, no boat epoxy, but it's still the original Sunburst, and I never play it. It's just sitting in my closet. I've had
Can I have it?
I'm guessing it's going to be worth a lot of money when the time comes. And then I have another 5-string, electric bass, a Fender that somebody needed. I did somebody's record, and they wanted 5-string. They're like, "Have you got a 5-string?" And I was like, "No, but if you can get me, can you get me?" He said, "Well, I'll get you one." So he got me one, and I played that session on that.
Yeah, but you don't just pick up a 5-string if you've never played one before.
Well, it worked out. It worked out okay.
Wow.
And then I started getting some calls for. I thought I might get some more calls for this kind of thing, so I bought a 5-string. So I still have that, and I play that. If I'm doing electric sessions, I usually play that one. And then when I got my first upright was a K plywood bass, and that served me well for quite a while. And when I first started playing upright, I would just take my electric bass to the gig too, and I'd start on the upright. And when my hands started completely killing me, I'd put the upright down and pick up my electric. And so the amount of time that I would spend on the electric and the upright, the proportion changed as I got better on the upright, to the point that I finally was able to leave the electric at home, and that was a victory. So I had a K, and then I found a really nice German bass that was for sale. I bought that, and that served me well for quite a while. And then for about 10 years now, I've had a really beautiful late 1800s Czechoslovakian bass that was restored actually by Bill Merchant in New York, and it found its way out to the West Coast, and I came upon it in a bass shop, and it was I sort of had to have it, so that's what I'm playing now. And I also have a travel bass, a Chadwick folding bass.
I was just thinking, when you said travel, I thought of Chadwick, the one that folds in half.
Yeah,
the guy from Nashville.
Nashville.
Yeah, those are very highly acclaimed. People love those. They say they sound great.
Yeah, and I've had that bass about 10 years now. And it's great because it's under 50 pounds. It goes as checked luggage. So I don't usually get stuck with overweight or oversized. So
what about a pickup?
I'm using the David Gage Realist. And on my good bass, I have the one with the foil, the gold foil element that seats under the foot of the bridge.
Also a David Gage?
Yeah, the Realist. And then on the travel bass, I have the Gage, but it's the newer one. It's the one that it fits in where the adjuster goes. I can't remember what the name of the name of that particular pickup is, but it's a pickup that Gage makes. That you can take on and off easily, whereas the Realist pickup you can't.
I really like him because I've been at a bunch of different kinds of conferences and shows with him, and he doesn't only make good stuff; he's a real fan of the music.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love that shop too. I love going into his shop.
I've never been there. I talked to Judy and Sam and all the people that work there, but I've never actually been to the shop. So I'll have to put that on my list. I want to ask you about learning bass for basspleyersonly.com. Yeah, we've got over 800 interviews like this. Well, not like this, but over 800 interviews. And we're really a bass instruction site. And most of the people that I attract, are men in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I got an email this morning from someone I think he said he's 81. And we get a fair bit of women, but that's mostly who we get. So
Uh-huh.
they're not career bound. They're not trying to be rock stars or set the world on fire. They've always wanted to play the bass. They love the music from the 60s and 70s and the Motown and the early rock, classic rock, the soul, some of the funk and R&B. So I say that to provide a context, given that that's who's coming here and that's what they want to do. They just want to play some blues shuffles and some classic rock riffs with their friends. In that context, Tom, what advice do you have for someone who wants to learn bass? What do you think is important for them to know?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a multidimensional question. Listening is really huge. I mean, you're sort of dealing with the ear and with technique, and with the ear, and then also being able to get what's in your head, what you hear, into the instrument. So that's both an ear, a hearing, and a technical issue. So, playing along with records. I mean, I think everybody starts that. I started that way. I started that way when I was, 8 years old on the clarinet, because I dug Pete Fountain, the clarinetist. So I got Pete Fountain records and started playing along with them, And
I saw him once too. I saw him in New Orleans
well, Pete was great.
at the World's Fair.
I finally got to meet Pete. I was doing a festival over in Colorado, and Pete was on this festival, and I went to I knew he had a rehearsal, so I went to the rehearsal because I wanted to meet him. And after the rehearsal, I said, Pete, I just wanted to tell you, you're like why I started playing music. And, I used to see you on the Lawrence Welk show, and, I play the clarinet, but I'm a bass player now. And he's like, oh, that's great, man. Wow, that's cool. Thanks. Let's go hang. So we were staying at the same hotel. So, we hung out, and he was the neatest guy. Yeah. So,
this was 1984 at the World's Fair in New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
So he was the first act, and then Wynton Marsalis, and then Buddy Rich with the big band.
Oh, yeah.
And then Mel Torme with Buddy's band.
Mm-hmm.
It was a different drummer when Mel came on, but
that was probably Donny Osborne. He played drums for Mel for many years.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. But anyway, just a tangent. You mentioned Pete Fountain, and I just remember seeing him on Johnny Carson.
But back to what we're discussing, the listening thing, playing along. So I think, even if you have really limited technique, if you can find a recording of something you like that's easy, that is within your grasp, even if it's, Louie, 3 notes, 3 chords, that you got to start somewhere, and you want to start at a level that's accessible to you, where you can find some success as well. And then you start sort of picking around and find your way around. I also really believe that technique is, you gotta work on your skills. You have to put in I play scales, man. I still play scales. I'll do about a half hour when I warm up, if I have time. Scales and arpeggios. And I think reading music is really important. A lot of people, there's a really good series, you probably are aware of it, called, it's by Dan Dean. And I think Hal Leonard used to publish it. It's probably called Electric Bass Volume 1, 2. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I do. That was, it's not quite as prevalent as it used to be, but that was always like the one.
I used to use that when I had a lot of electric bass students. Yeah. And one thing I didn't like about the book was that it had the notation on the top line, and then on the bottom line right below it had tablature. Yes. So I used to make my students white out all the tablature on the very first lesson. I didn't, and my thinking is, if you're looking at tablature, you're learning a system of notation, but you're learning a system that not everybody in the world uses. If you're going to learn a notation, learn the notation that everyone in the world uses. That's notes. It's all the cats that are good. That's a bad statement. In my world, and people with whom I have played over much of my life, they all read. How can you communicate? How can you get on a gig where you have an hour to rehearse, and you don't know the music? How can you make it happen unless you can somebody put a piece of music in front of you? And so it's really important, is what I'm saying. And it's tedious. and it takes a long time. But again, if you just do it in little teeny pieces, and it's one of those things where, you do it for a month or two and you pick up a couple of little nuggets and you go, oh, that was pretty cool. I
Yeah.
got a new thing, and you get excited. That's what it's all about. No matter what level we are, we get excited when we put in some work and maybe have some frustration and maybe hit a roadblock. And then when we jump that, when we ascend over that, it makes us feel good and it makes us want more. And I think
Yeah.
that's what the learning process is about, lifelong.
Yeah. Well, Hal Leonard just published my 10th book
Wow, really?
in January. Every one of them has tablature, but my online courses, the Bottom Line Club is my school at forbassplayersonly.com, and I also have a master class called Power Grooving for bass players.
Uh-huh.
And I've gotten a lot of requests from my students to have to get rid of the tab.
Yeah.
So I didn't get rid of the tab, but I started offering a tab-free option. There's a PDF for all the music notation.
Yes.
So now I'm starting to add tab-free options, and right away, oh, thank you so much. I've been
that's
asking
great.
for it. Yeah.
Carol Kay was a big help for me. I studied with Carol
Ah.
on electric bass, and man, she got me reading rhythms that I thought I could read rhythms, but I really didn't know how to read rhythms because I had a good ear. So all I needed to have was somebody put a piece of music in front of me. And if I couldn't play a certain thing, a certain figure, all they had to do was tell me, well, it goes like this. And I had a good enough ear I could remember.
I
And we
did a
still
phone
correspond.
interview with Carol Kay several years ago, and she was just so kind and
Oh, she's
so.
great.
You know what else is great for learning to read music? Writing music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've written an unbelievable amount of music with my books and all my online stuff, and then it's just you figure it out. And it helps me work with my students. And look, beat 2 is going to come down whether you're ready for it or not. And it's just how many ways are we cutting up the quarter note?
That's
8th
exactly
notes,
right.
16th notes. And
that's exactly right.
the time doesn't change, the pulse doesn't change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the light goes on eventually.
Yeah, because it's not a mystery. It's mathematical.
Yeah, but trying to get them to understand the triplet subdivision and swinging the 8 notes can be a little challenging if somebody is not doesn't have that in their DNA.
Yeah.
But
I think that a lot of enthusiasts, and a lot of the people who may be coming to your site, that just want to play for fun and enjoyment. There's so many different ways to find enjoyment in what we do, and so they should be able to find success, in this process, on any level, and each one is going to have different music perhaps that they listen to or that they like, or a different feel or sound that moves them, and if they can discover those things and sort of get deep into them, then they'll feel good.
It's great. I love seeing these life-changing moments for these.
I know.
Students.
Yeah. I've always had one foot in education. And I'm sort of out of teaching these days, just because I like playing more.
Well, that's right. You've given all kinds of master classes and clinics and traveled around.
Yeah, and I taught. I mean, I did a lot of private teaching, and I taught college, and I had a real job for about 13 years. I was the chair of a music department at a community college. So I've done education in a lot of different ways, and the thing that I miss the most is the students. Is the personal relationships and seeing someone, get turned on when they, when the light goes on, when they make a new discovery.
Yeah,
it's great.
I know you're very accomplished on the clarinet, and you played some saxophone and you took piano lessons. But my signature sign-off question is, what would you be if you were not a bass player? And it's something outside of music.
Wow, man, I have no idea. I have no idea. I've been doing music all my life. It's all I've ever done.
Well, stick with it. It's obviously working for you.
Working, yeah. I knew I wanted to do music from when I was like 4 years old. So I don't know what I do. I mean, it's, music is, I feel so blessed and grateful and fortunate to have found a way to do this for, I'm 68, all my life, and to do this music thing and like make a living and be comfortable and, have resources and have raised a family and, and getting better, still like getting better, I'm still getting better, man. I'm working and getting to play with all these great musicians, like you said, like Benny Golson or Lee Konitz, or like playing with Chuck Red and Lewis Nash and Angelo Versace this last week. I mean, those guys are, Lewis Nash, for example, he's on like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of albums.
Yeah.
Joe Lovano and Tommy Flanagan Trio. And I'm like next to him on the bandstand, and I'm just going like, thank you for letting me do this. Like this is sort of amazing.
It is
So I guess I've got a lot invested in in this music thing, and I've never really thought about what I might do otherwise.
Well, Tom Wakeling, it's so great getting to know you, and thank you for your emails and letting us know online what you're up to, and hope to see you in person. But in the meantime, so happy to know you. Much luck, continued success to you always, and keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm honored to be a guest, and I'll look forward to hopefully meeting you in person sometime soon.
Thank you so much. With our very, very special guest, Tom Wakeling. I'm John Liebman. You're watching the #1 site for learning bass online. It's not for everyone. It's for bass players only.
I love it.